Hi guys. So recently there have been plenty of news reports about the spread of the New World screwworm going from Panama all the way through to Mexico and then encroaching onto the US border. This understandably has caused great alarm, obviously in the US and also I'm sure elsewhere, although I haven't been following the Mexican news as closely. But this New World screwworm poses a significant threat to livestock and also to wildlife because this worm behaves differently to a typical maggot. A typical maggot feasts on dead flesh, but the New World screwworm does a little bit different. It feasts on live flesh. So if a cow maybe grazed itself against the fence, then it would have a wound. So the fly would be able to smell this wound and lay its eggs on the wound. After these eggs hatch, then the larvae, or maggots as they're colloquially known, they would screw themselves into the open wound. That would obviously increase the size of the wound, posing giving more opportunity for the flies to lay eggs on the same wound. The larva would screw itself into the live flesh, often causing significant pain and potentially death to the animal. Now, what is the strategy to defeat this hellspawn? Interestingly, the strategy to defeat this worm is to actually introduce more flies. Now, when I first saw that, read about that, I was a bit curious. Why would very smart people decide to increase the number of flies in order to reduce the number of flies and thereby maggots? After reading into it, I think I have a gist of it. It's not your typical flies introduced. It is a sterile male fly that is introduced in vast quantities. I think I read a paper they were saying about introducing about something in the realm of billions of these male sterile flies into infested areas. So I thought about it and I was intrigued by the counterintuitive nature of the strategy. And I thought that system dynamics model can perhaps give me a few insights about why that's the case. And so I created a system dynamic model of the screwworm. This one is in insightmaker.com, very lightweight and easy to use and open, maybe not open source, but free to use as well. So what I've done is I've created a model here, and let me explain it to you briefly. So eggs lead to larvae, larvae lead to pupa. So pupa are the chrysalis, I think that's the right term, of fly, which are buried, which spend time underground, and then the fly leaves the pupa. So there could be a male fly or a female fly or a male fly. The ratio after doing some research is 1-to-1. So there's it's going to be 50% chance it's going to be a female or for a male. The thing is, the lifespan of a female fly is about, and also for the male fly, is about 30 days. In that 30-day period, the female flies are able to hatch 3,000 eggs during the female fly lifetime. Clearly, these eggs, assuming 100% are hatch or close to 100%, then you can understand that there's going to be an exponential amount of flies given an infinite amount of hosts for the flies to lay eggs on. And that's represented in this loop here. More eggs leads to more larva. More larva leads to more pupa. Pupa leads to more female flies, as there is a one-to-one relationship between female flies and male flies. Female flies are able to mate. They can, interestingly enough, the New World screwworm can only mate. The female New World screwworm fly is only able to mate once and lay 3,000 eggs. And then over the time period, those 3,000 eggs lead to more larvae, more pupa, more female fly. And so there's an exponential loop. And we can show that in action if I turn this down to 0. I'll introduce this factor later, and I hit C. And you can see if I start with, and I started with 1 million eggs. After 100 days, and this, the timeline is days here, then those 1 million eggs will result into how much? Close to 5 to the power of 31, which is a shed load more than 1 million. So there's an exponential growth in the number of larvae, right? Which is understandable because more eggs, more larvae, more pupa, more female flies. And then each female fly is able to lay 3,000 eggs, then that's a lot. So the strategy is to introduce, the strategy to combat these spread of this hellspawn is to introduce stale male flies, right? So what does that have an impact on? So let's say I introduce the number of flies I introduce, or no, I should say number of introduce male stale flies. Let's say I introduce at the beginning 1 million every day. See what happens. So I'm introducing 1 million sterile flies. And the idea is that if the female has the chance to mate, the chances of their mating with a sterile male fly compared to the number of fertile male flies, that chance would result in the eggs that are laid are not able to hatch because they're not fertilized. If you increase the number of stale male flies, then there's a higher chance that the female flies would mate with the sterile male flies, resulting in eggs not able to hatch, and therefore they die. So it really depends on the ratio between stale male flies and fertile male flies, right? If the ratio is in the favor of sterile male flies, then we should see a decrease in the population. So let's just see how we go. At the beginning, I introduce just 1 million sterile flies per day. See what happens. You can see that there's still an exponential growth. So I need to increase the number of flies dramatically, the number of sterile flies dramatically. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go from 1 million, I'm going to change that to 40 million. And see what happens. Now there's something that's interesting that's happening. Okay, so at the beginning, my 1 million eggs, after a short period of time, they transform into larvae. And the larvae, because it's a one-to-one relationship between male and female, they result into males and female. However, you can see that the number of sterile flies that I introduced is still not enough because the number of fertile male flies and female flies are continuing to increase. And you see the blue line here is the number of larvae. And you can see that it's oscillating, but towards the end it's growing. And I would expect if I draw out this time horizon to, let's say, 200, then I would see an exponential growth anyway. Right. So here, even with 40 million flies introduced per day, I should say 40 million sterile flies introduced per day, they're still trending towards an exponential growth of larvae. Now, let's change that 40 million to 45 million. See what happens. Oh, now there's something interesting happening, because the number of larvae decreases because all the larvae turn into flies, and these female flies, they're the orange line, and the male fertile male flies are the green line. You can see that they are oscillating, but they're trending down. And also the number of larvae, which is the scourge that we want to eliminate, is also reducing down to close to zero, right? At the end of the 100 days, then there's about 3,000 larvae. So given the time horizon, and assuming that the strategy to introduce flies, and this is a prestigious number of flies, sterile flies that we're introducing, right? Assuming that's the case, then we should see the population of the larvae die. So there's really a threshold between, or a tipping point, I should say. Before this tipping point, the number of sterile flies, which just delays the inevitable explosion of larvae. However, above this tipping point, then we do start to see a decrease in the number of larvae. And let me turn back to the systems dynamic model and to explain a little bit why that's the case. So we mentioned before that there's a positive loop here, assuming that there's no sterile male flies being introduced. More eggs, more larvae, more pupa, more female flies, more eggs. So there's a positive reinforcing loop here. If when sterile male flies are introduced, something interesting happens. That, as I mentioned before, sterile male flies introduced, it has a negative impact. It has a negative impact on the number of eggs transforming into larvae. So there's a negative force here. So if I increase the number of sterile male flies, I am decreasing the number of larvae, and therefore I'm decreasing the number of pupa, and I'm decreasing the number of female flies, and therefore I'm also decreasing the number of eggs. So this balancing loop that I just mentioned, because of the introduction of sterile male flies, is counterbalancing the reinforcing loop without the sterile male flies. And so there's a fine point where theoretically they could be perfectly balanced, where you keep the population in sync. But that's not what we want here. We want to destroy the new world screwworm. And so we want to make the balancing loop stronger than the reinforcing loop. And that perhaps explains why you need to have a prodigious number of new world screwworm sterile male flies introduced to infested areas. And this is 45 million in a day, each day, 400 days at least. So there you go. So this is the model for the New World Screwworm, using systems dynamic models to illustrate the trends. It is publicly available. I'll drop the link in the description. So if you like the video, then click like. If you want to subscribe to some more videos about system engineering and systems thinking and everything related to systems engineering, then hit the subscribe button, and let's get going. Thank you.